Okay, we are recording. Um, Thank you both for coming. And today we're going to talk about the holistic management of fever. And I know this is it's an important topic for parents, especially because a lot of times, our kids will spike these crazy high fevers, and it just scares the crap out of us. And the common current knowledge or wisdom or advice being thrown around is always to take Tylenol, take ibuprofen, the NSAIDs, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs to bring that fever down, because let's be honest, fevers are uncomfortable. They don't feel good. Where's it? Here, you want that? There, go. Okay, so they're uncomfortable. They make everything okay. They make our bodies hurt. We get achy, we get goofy. It just doesn't feel good. And so it's really hard for us, especially as parents or caregivers, to watch our kids suffer like that. We just want to make it better. And sometimes in wanting to make it better, we will give a Tylenol or ibuprofen, Advil, whatever, and bring that fever down. But is that really the best strategy long term for our kids' health and for our own health? And when you really look at the research, the answer is no. Okay, so let's just start by talking what the normal range of body temperatures is. I know common knowledge says that, a normal temp is 98.6, but that is really an oversimplification. It's not even the average, honestly. The average is 97.7, so it's a little bit lower. And the normal range is between 95 and 99. So some people are walking around with a 99 degree Fahrenheit temperature all the time, and that is their normal. And then there are people like me who walk around with a 95.5. I'm very cold, on the cold end. And what does that mean when we're looking at someone? It means that the numbers don't always tell the whole picture. They're not always showing us the whole picture, telling the whole story. They're just a number. And what's the most important thing for us as caregivers, as parents, as herbalists, as human beings, is looking not just at the number, but looking at the person and really being in response to what they are showing us, what they are telling us, as to what they're feeling and what their symptoms are, because that is going to give us a more informed response than just a number on a thermometer. Okay, because I might go to the doctor and say, oh my God, I feel like crap. I've got all these fever symptoms. I've got all of this stuff. Yet they'll take my temperature and it's 97.9. But to me, who normally runs 95.5, that is a significant low-grade fever. But they don't know that because they're not looking at the whole picture. They're just looking at a number. You don't have a fever, you're fine. Okay, so the chief concern with any fever is not the fever itself. It's always 100% going to be dehydration. Because one of the things that happens with fever is it's a big increase in circulation throughout the body with that inflammatory response. We're going to get sweating on and off, and it will also suppress our digestion. So we're not going to want to eat or take in anything, and we usually feel crappy, so we're not going to want to eat or drink. And so all of these things can, quickly, with the increase in body temperature as well, the sweating can lead to dehydration pretty quickly. And that is really the biggest concern. And so we'll talk about strategies for dehydration in a little bit when we get further on along. Okay, so there were some animal studies that were done, and I found them kind of interesting. And these studies were all done around suppression of fever using antipyretic medications. Okay, so the antipyretics, pyretic means fever, anti-fever medications. So they're fever-lowering medications. So they're all the NSAIDs, the non-steroidal, I can't say that word, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. So you know, ibuprofen, Advil, that kind of stuff, the naproxen, aspirin, and then the acetaminophen, which is the Tylenol. Okay. So they did a study with rabbits who had a disease that rabbits get called Pasteurella. Okay, untreated, Pasteurella in rabbits will have a 29% mortality rate. So 29% of rabbits who get Pasteurella, who don't get any kind of treatment at all, will die. Okay, when they treated those rabbits, when they treated their fever to reduce their fevers by 1.5 degrees, just 1.5 degrees, they reduced their fevers, the mortality rate went from 29% to 100%. Every single one of those rabbits died. And that's pretty shocking, I think. I mean, that's a huge jump. It's not like, oh, like 5% more died. No, they all died, every single one of them. So that kind of starts to show us, wow, fever's really important here. Okay. In 8 different animal trials with influenza virus, the use of antipyretics increased mortality rates by 34%. In animals with pneumonia, the use of the antipyretics doubled the mortality rate. So we're looking at 50% increase. And overall, the use of antipyretic drugs increased not only the mortality rate, but the duration of the illness. So if it didn't, you know, take you to, you know, the ultimate, and it was just making it last a heck of a lot longer than it normally would if it was allowed to run its natural course. Okay, so none of those things are good, right? I mean, that doesn't like paint a really pretty picture. It doesn't, you know, and granted, these are animal studies. They are animals that, you know, were used, you know, they were given these illnesses and then treated with these drugs. Their systems aren't exactly the same for us, but it really does show us a correlation, and a negative one. Okay, so what is the one thing that, you know, one of the main things that these drugs do, these antipyretic drugs do when we take them, is that they inhibit, I'm going to have to read this, they inhibit the cyclooxygenase, which is a substance which is essential for the production of interferon, which is in the primary defense of our immune system against viruses. So the immune system, you know, gets woken up, you know, by the presence of a virus, and it goes into action by stimulating this fever, the primary inflammatory response, and it goes to produce the interferon, which interferes with the virus in the body. It helps to stop it from proliferating. So we're taking these drugs because we don't feel good. We want to lower that fever, but we're actually fighting against our body handling this virus or this bacteria. And not only that, but the Tylenol processes through our liver, and the ibuprofen will process through our kidneys, and in so doing can be extremely damaging to both of those organs over time. The chronic suppression of fever. So if we are using these antipyretic drugs over and over and over again in our life, we're probably going to end up seeing, and I couldn't really find a whole lot of information on this, but it's my feeling that we're going to start seeing like dysregulation within this cycle, within this fever mechanism. And what that would look like is that we'll consistently just mount a very low-grade, weak, non-productive fever, or we'll get the other end of the spectrum where the body's like, oh my God, I got to get as much heat into this as possible to knock this thing out before they take my feet out from underneath me with these drugs. So you're seeing, you know, I think we're going to, you know, people are starting to see these extremes with the body's response. It's just not regulating as normally as it does. In one of the studies that one of the papers that I read, the chronic suppression of the fevers was also leading to what they call a post-viral syndrome, which is essentially chronic fatigue syndrome. It's also called, what is it also called? It was funny. Where is it? Oh, Lake Tahoe syndrome. I'm like, what the heck is Lake Tahoe syndrome? And I looked it up, and it was like also called the yuppie flu, which is just another name for chronic fatigue syndrome, right? We're just tired all the time. We're achy. You know, we have this malaise where we just don't feel like doing anything. Or, you know, we have the brain fog. We just, you know, you generally just feel like crap. Okay, so that was one of the things that they saw from chronic suppression of this fever response. Okay, so what is a fever? A fever is a beneficial rise in the body's metabolism and core temperature in response to a pathogen. Okay, it's part of the beneficial inflammatory response, and it will stimulate the increase in production of white blood cells, increases antibody production 20-fold. So it's really that fever response just kickstarts everything. It retards the growth and replication of viruses and bacteria. So it creates an inhospitable environment for these pathogens to live and breed in our bodies. And if they can't live and breed, then they can't make us really, really sick. Okay, so that's the way it kind of nips it in the bud. The fever will increase circulation in our bodies, and it increases the surface defenses. So what that means is that you're going to see increased mucus production in the mucous membranes, because that is our surface defense, the mucous membranes, which we talked about last week with our mucus production. Okay, let's see. It's also going to increase circulation either to the core or to the periphery, depending on what cycle of the fever that it's in. And when we increase circulation to the periphery, we're basically venting the body so that we've gotten really hot and now we're cooling it down. We're going to get really hot, we're going to cool it down. And it kind of goes in that kind of cycle. The really cool thing about fevers, and the most important thing I think about fevers to know about them, is that they are self-limiting. The body, through the hypothalamus in the brain, has a set point at which it will click off and go into that venting, cooling mode. And so I think that's one of the biggest fears that a lot of parents, especially in caregivers, have, is they see this fever rising. It's like 104 degrees. And you're like, oh my God, 105 degrees. Oh my God, they're just going to keep going, and it's going to cook their brain and they're going to die. And oh my God. And there's really no evidence to support that. The hypothalamus, unless an individual has, you know, a specific condition that, you know, that the hypothalamus does not have a set point, and that would be a medical emergency. You know, that's something completely, that's very rare, because the set point is 106 degrees, at which point the hypothalamus is going to say, okay, time to cool this down. It's going to increase circulation to the periphery. The pores in our skin are going to open up. We're going to sweat. The air is going to hit the wetness, the sweat on our skin. It's going to cool us down. Okay, so it's going to take us down a few degrees, you know, probably down to maybe 101, 102, you know, maybe down to 99. And then we're going to sit with that for a while, and then it's going to ramp back up and cycle back up. Okay, so there really isn't, unless it's a very extreme individual case, there's really no, there should be no fear that the body is going to just keep ramping this fever up until it cooks us. It just, that's not how it's set up. It has a set point, and at that set point, it stops and downregulates. Okay. And then at fevers between 104 to 106, no tissue damage will occur. Okay, except to those viruses and bacteria. Okay, so on the flip side, the thing that people are most afraid of is, you know, the fever cooking the body and causing irreparable damage. That is actually hyperthermia. And there's a difference between fever and hyperthermia. Hyperthermia is considered heat stroke or heat exhaustion and then heat stroke. There's no set point to downregulate the heat mechanism in that situation. And that is where the damage and the danger lies. When we go into hyperthermia, which is something completely different from fever, and fever will not lead to hyperthermia. Hyperthermia is caused by being in extreme situations that our bodies cannot escape. Think of a dog or a infant in a hot car in July with the windows closed. They can't get out, they can't escape. There's no way for their body to vent off that heat that's building in their body. Think of an athlete, marathon runner, who is competing in temperatures above 50 degrees outside, and they're just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and generating. Some athletes can generate an internal body temperature of 104 degrees through exercise and exertion alone. And then if there's heat and the sun is shining on them and they're going for 2 hours nonstop, that is when you see heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Okay, so these extreme conditions where the body is not getting a break, the body is getting dehydrated, and then that is where we're going to see damage. And there is no down regulation because the body can't escape from that situation. Okay, so tissue in that situation, tissue damage can start occurring at 105.8 up to 107.6 and beyond, and that's it's a life-threatening emergency when we have hyperthermia, but it's not the same as a fever. Okay, does that make sense? Did I lose you, Kate? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to take a drink of water. All right, so how do we, so let's say, you know, we have our person in front of us and they are showing signs of feeling crappy, and you know, how do we support them? You know, what is the treatment? We don't want to take antipyretics. We don't want to lower the fever. So what do? How can we help them? All right. The most important thing, like I said in the beginning, is not to treat the number. We treat the person. And so we're going to look at the person in front of us. What do we see? How are they feeling? What are they reporting? What are they telling us? We take all of that into consideration. And then we look at the temperature, the number on the thermometer. Okay, and then we can formulate a plan. So let's say we look at them and they're cold and they're shivering and they've got the chills and they just can't warm up. And their fever at that point is probably low grade, probably maybe 100, you know, under 100, like 99 to 101, maybe, let's just say, depending on the person. Like I said, you know, 101, if my temperature was actually 101 on the thermometer, I'd be roasting. So we have to take all of that into consideration as well. But let's say they're running a low grade fever, it's kind of weak, and they're really cold. So the first thing, some of the first things we can do is just try and warm them up. Okay, as simple as that. Get them in a warm bath or shower or a steam. Get them out, keep them covered, socks on, just bundle them up. Make sure that they're resting, getting good solid rest, quiet, and making sure that they stay hydrated. Okay, so, you know, water, obviously that's the easiest thing, but coconut water is great for hydration. I'm not a huge fan of Pedialyte, but if that's the only thing you can get in somebody, then it's, you know, and Gatorade, if those are the only things you can get into them, it's better than nothing. Okay, and they're usually the last on my list though. Any kind of warm tea, bone broth, watermelon is amazing for hydrating. It's like a fruity electrolyte in a delicious container. So yeah, eat a ton of watermelon, it keeps you very hydrated. And then homemade electrolyte water is another option. And I'm including a recipe for that with the notes. So you'll get that after we're done. So, so you've done all of that. You know, you got them, you got them in a warm bath, and they're out, they're all bundled up, and, you know, and they're drinking, you know, some water, but, you know, and they have their socks on, and you're trying to keep them, but they're still just like shaking, and they're still cold. It just can't warm up. The fever is still weak. That's when we start looking at, okay, so how can we support this fever? and how can we support the body and the mechanism. And then we start looking at stimulating diaphoretic herbs. And diaphoretic herbs are herbs that support the fever process. Stimulating ones are usually warming herbs. And so they're going to increase the circulation in the core to help build and stoke that fever and really bring it on. They are going to be best given warm in a tea form, a hot tea or a warm tea, because just the heat from the tea itself and the steam and inhaling that steam is going to help warm the core as well. You can give tinctures of these same herbs, but it's usually best to add them to a tea or just warm water, because when you give a tincture of a particular herb, you're going to see different benefits from it versus when it's warm. Okay, so ideally, you're going to give these herbs in tea form. And so the most common herbs, people will use ginger, very warming, very stimulating. It's also very antiviral, so it gives a good, 1-2 punch there. Monarda bee balm is really delicious. It's very antimicrobial. It tastes like oregano. It's really lovely and delicious. Okay, and that's going to be warming and stimulating. Hyssop and all the different the mint family herbs, they're going to taste really great, and they're also going to be stimulating. Yarrow is on both lists, so we'll talk about that in a second. But yarrow, when warm, can be very stimulating. It's also very antimicrobial, so it will help to be fighting infection as well. So we're going to just kind of give these teas. We're going to give we're going to pick a couple of these herbs. If people love ginger, that's great. My go-to is always squeeze half or a full lemon into a mug of hot water, a couple teaspoons of local honey, and a good knob, in a mug, a tablespoon, a good knob of freshly grated ginger, and just kind of let them sip on it. And if that's sweet, and if they like ginger, that is going to be like the most amazing thing. It tastes really good, and it'll be easy to go down, and that heat from the ginger and from the tea is just going to be very stimulating. It's going to help to stoke that fever so that it's more productive. And it's gonna make that fever get high and a little bit higher, so it's more effective. Hi, baby. I know. I love you. Oh, no. You're a good boy. You are. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So that is for people who are experiencing a weaker fever. Okay, and they're cold and chilled. But what if they present the opposite? What if they, we go to them and they are their face is red and kind of shiny, they're tense and agitated, they're burning up, they're really, really hot, they look all bleary-eyed, and we take their temperature and it's really high, and they're just so uncomfortable. This is when we're going to want to take the support in the other direction. We're going to want a cooling bath or a cooling cloth on their face and on their neck, especially. That's really, really soothing. We are going to want to continue with the rest and continue with the hydration. And just the same as we did before. And then we're going to start looking at a different set of herbs called relaxing diaphoretics. Okay, so when the heat, the temperature in the body and the fever is that high, and they're not sweating, and they're just really just hot to the touch, and they're red, sometimes it needs, we can support that process of venting. And the relaxing diaphoretics are going to increase circulation to the periphery and open those pores, almost like opening the windows in a hot house, just letting some of the heat off, letting that sweat come out, and have that natural thermal regulation with the wetness on the skin and the air around them, cooling them off a few degrees to make them more comfortable. It's not killing the fever, it's not breaking the fever, it's just supporting the body in taking a little bit of a break and kind of getting back into that rhythm of, oh, this is how I do this. I stay this hot for this long and then I have to vent it down. You know, the herbs are just reminding the body of its own wisdom and its own process and supporting it in that. Okay. Let's see. Some of these relaxing diaphoretic herbs have the added bonus, so like some of the other ones as being antiviral and microbial, but some of them are also pain relieving. So they have, some of these herbs will have salicylic acid precursors in them, which means that when they get into our body, it stimulates our body's own natural response of creating aspirin, basically. They're not going to lower the fever. They're not going to act in the same way as a synthetic aspirin would. It's just stimulating your body's own remembrance of, oh yeah, I can do this. I can do this. Okay. And so it can really take the edge off the aches and pains that people feel. The downside to some of these herbs is they don't really taste very good. So it's important to kind of have a few different tools in your toolkit to get them into people. Now, as adults, we can be like, okay, I know this is good for me. This tastes like shit, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. It's not as easy to convince a little one to drink some bone set tea because it tastes horrible. It's so bitter. Okay. But it's so beneficial. You know, how can we make it taste better? You know, or, you know, maybe we don't need to go as severe as bone set, you know, as intense as bone set. We can use some other herbs. So, let's see. Oh, and with these herbs, it's the same. They're going to be more beneficial given warm or as a hot tea, even though we're trying to cool the body down a little bit. It just brings out the heat and the warmth. It brings out their diaphoretic qualities more so than their other cooling astringent qualities, a lot of these herbs. So it's not going to be a bad thing if you just take tinctures, or if, because, you know, the person is so hot, or if it's a kid and you make one of these teas into a popsicle, you know, it's still going to benefit them. It's still going to help the body regulate that fever in a positive way, in a beneficial way. It just might, you know, it's just not going to be maybe as beneficial as if you're giving it warm, but it will still be beneficial. Okay. So this list is a little bit longer. We have chamomile on this list, which everyone loves chamomile. It's very calming. It's very soothing. So it's going to have that added benefit of just relaxing the whole body. You know, it's good for the digestion. It's just a nice, calming, gentle herb that tastes really, really good. And if it's not steeped for a really long time, it's not bitter. So it has a natural sweetness. Put a little honey in there. Most kids will drink chamomile tea. Elderflower tea is another one that's very, very great as a relaxing diaphoretic. It is also antiviral. Okay, so, and that one tastes pretty good too. Meadowsweet and white willow bark are two that will also relax the periphery, and I believe that they do this a little bit more via their salicylic acid precursor content. They are pain relieving, so, you know, maybe with your cup of chamomile, you just put a little pinch of willow in there. It's a little less potent than the meadowsweet, but sometimes people like meadowsweet better. Okay, so it just depends. Bone set, it's been used extensively through time for fevers, through the influenza pandemics. You know, herbalists for centuries have been using bone set. It is really powerful. And so, you know, when I make a fever tea, I like to use bone set, but then I also will put, you know, some mints in there, some spearmint, maybe some chamomile or elderflower, you know, and maybe some ginger, something, you know, just something, you know, to kind of, you know, offset the bitterness of the bone set. Linden, flower and leaf is another really nice relaxing diaphoretic, and it tastes really good. Lemon balm, also antiviral, tastes really great. Most kids will gladly drink lemon balm tea. And then the last one is yarrow. Yarrow also will work for both types of fever. It's pretty powerful, and she's really beautiful. So the typical pattern the body will cycle between will be about 4 days of this heating and venting before, usually on the 4th day, that fever breaks and we wake up in that puddle of sweat. And we know then we're probably going to run about a 99, that very kind of low grade fever for a few days. The rest and recovery at this point is crucial, because we don't want to, oh, I'm better now, I'm going to get up and I'm going to start doing stuff. We really want to give our bodies time to recover. So we want to maintain rest. We want to maintain hydration. After that last sweat, our digestion will stimulate again, which means that we'll probably be hungry. We'll want to eat. And so, a good way to get, foods back in is a nice broth, either a bone broth or chicken broth or a veggie broth if you're a vegetarian. Maybe throw some additional mushrooms in there, a little maitake, a little shiitake, maybe a little bit of reishi, just to really start building up that vitality again. And then, and then, you're on the road to recovery. So do you have any questions? And Tina, you're the only one with me right now. I think Kate had to pause to go do something.
Captive audience.
What?
I guess basically, I'm just curious. I have like lemon balm, and I have yarrow, and I have chamomile growing. I know how to make, lemon balm and chamomile. What part of the yarrow do you?
The flowers.
Use the flowers?
Yeah, I usually will harvest the top like third.
Okay.
So you're getting some leaves, but it's mainly the flowers. So yarrow she will come into full bloom around the solstice. So it's one of those that I like to go out and gather around the summer solstice.
I have some that is dried. Is it better fresh or dry, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Dried is, it's, most of us aren't going to be running a huge fever in the summer. Most of us get the ick in the winter. So you're going to want to have it dried. Okay. And you want to make sure that you're using the wild yarrow, the white yarrow.
Oh, good to know.
Okay, because the cultivated yarrows, the pink ones, the yellow ones, they have different constituents that haven't really been studied extensively. Herbalist Susan Weed says they're toxic, but I don't think they're toxic. I just think that they're different. And I think that the wild yarrow that comes up in our lawns and in our gardens, the white yarrow. I also have a very, very pale pink one that comes up in the yard that I also use and is very effective. But the bright fuchsia ones, the ones that you're buying at the garden center to put in your beds, aren't going to be the ideal yarrows to use. Okay.
If it's dusty.
What?
If it's dusty, can you
rinse it? Like the powdery mildew?
Well, I mean,
dusty, like
if you haven't stored it in like a closed container.
Oh, right. Well, you know what? If it's all you have, it's not going to be the end of the world.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, over time the herbs are going to lose potency. But I've used herbs that are 2-3 years old, and they've been fine.
Oh, good.
They've worked perfectly well. So a little bit of dust, yeah, I mean, you're gonna pull the cobwebs out of them, but yeah, it's fine, if it's all you have, if you're miserable and you really need support and that is all you have, then absolutely, I would say use it. As long as it doesn't have mold growing on it, should be fine.
Are all of these are safe for children too?
None of these are none of these herbs are considered like a low dose botanical or, you know, poisonous or whatever, you know. And you're going to be, they're all, you know, these are all just common plants, you know, that people drink as tea and eat as food. And,
Oh yeah.
you know, there's nothing fancy or, you know, exotic about any of them.
Right.
So unless somebody has a very specific allergy, which sometimes it's hard to know, but you know, they're all considered safe. Okay. I'm just gonna look over my notes really quick. I want to make sure I mentioned everything. So like I said, I have an electrolyte water recipe in here, which is really nice. You can make up a big gallon of it. I usually use 2 cups of either filtered water or like a mix of filtered water and some kind of juice that I like. Pomegranate juice is nice. You could use the juice of a watermelon in there, you know, that would be really good. The juice of 1 lemon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of mineral salt, like the pink Himalayan salt or the Redmond mineral salt is really good. Some people use baking soda, and I have used baking soda in the past, but I think the salt is just better. And then you just sweeten it with honey or maple syrup to taste. If you have, you know, good local maple syrup, that adds its own kind of electrolytes and, you know, and glucose to kind of help keep the body, you know, from bottoming out and for energy. And then the local honey has so many beautiful antimicrobial benefits. It's really amazing. So yeah, you just keep a jug of that, you know, in the fridge, and that's like your homemade Gatorade, especially if you make it with juice, you know, with, you know, a diluted juice. So, you know, I think it's going to be better. It's not going to have artificial flavorings and colorings and all that crap in it. And it's just real simple. And you can experiment with, you know, different juices and stuff. And it's really good. And then I also have a recipe for elderflower popsicles for kids or adults, anyone. I mean, you can make it, you know, just for fun. You don't have to save them just for fevers, but I know that, you know, when my girl gets sick, I will make a tea, and then I will, you know, make her favorite juice. Sometimes it's just orange juice. Orange juice is a little mucus producing, so sometimes it's not the best, but I dilute it way down, and it's what she likes, and so she'll take it. And that's the most important thing for me. Sometimes I just make a lemonade, you know, a simple lemonade with fresh lemons and maple syrup. And then I'll add elderflower tea or maybe some lemon balm to it, because the lemon balm goes really well with lemonade. It just kind of mixes really well. And I'll either make it into popsicles, or if I want it to be ready faster, I'll just pour it into an 8x8 or a 9x9 cake pan, or a 9x13 cake pan. And so you're going to make it almost like a granite, you know, so you're going to let it kind of freeze, and you're going to take a fork and scrape it so it's just like Italian ice, and then you eat that. Okay, so that's very cooling, but you're also getting the herbs in there, and then it's also very hydrating. Sophie calls it her scrapey stuff. Make me the scrapey stuff. And that's why I know she's dehydrated. She needs support. You know, she wants her scrapey stuff. So anyway, those recipes are in there, and I will I'll get that out in Messenger hopefully in PDF form, if my goofy computer will do that for me. But do you have any other questions?
Nothing that's popping into my mind. You've done a really great job.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot. So
okay. Well, you know, feel free to, you know, you can always email me or text me, you know, if you have other questions. If something comes up, you're like, oh, this doesn't make sense, or whatever. You know, I'm happy to answer that. And yeah. All right. Thank you, Tina. Thanks, Kate, even though you're kind of in the ethers right now. It was nice hanging out with you guys. And
sorry, I'm here just sort of in and out, but
okay.
I appreciate it, Maria.
Yeah, no problem. Did you have any questions, Kate?
You know, I'm probably going to have to listen to you again, because you know, there's some things that I did miss, but I'm grateful.
Okay, well, I'm going to get this up on YouTube. Kindred Root is the name of my channel. It'll be up, you know, for replay as often as you want. I'll probably post a link as well. And you know, you can email me questions or message me if you have questions. And what was the other thing I was going to say? I can't remember now. Oh, any other ideas? You know, if there's anything else you guys want me to talk about, or, you know, I'm going to be shooting a video later about the energies that I'm feeling right now. So how we're all kind of cycling between, like, you know, just fear and anger, and then grief, fear, anger, grief, fear, anger, grief, and how that's affecting our kidneys, our liver, and our lungs, and how that kind of trinity is just kind of just spiraling, and hopefully finding some ways of maybe stepping outside of that cycle so that we can get a better perspective on it. I'm not going to necessarily do a class on that. I'm probably just going to do a video, and that'll be on my YouTube channel as well. So thank you girls so much for coming. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And let me know if you have any other ideas, anything you want to talk about. We can set up another class, and hopefully we can get more people to come and join us. All right.
Sounds good.
Be well, you guys. And I will.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Bye.